This is the Etho Hopper clock. Created in 2013 by Etho's lab, it still remains one of the most pivotal and influential redstone designs in the history of Minecraft. But there is something seriously lacking, not with the design itself, but with how we've been using it. Today I hope to elevate this iconic design and pay tribute to one of the greatest Minecrafters in history. But first, we need to understand how the Etho Hopper clock works. Which to do that, we need to know how Minecraft works. And to know how Minecraft works, you must know how game engines work. And even further, we need to know how Notch works. And how time works. And... okay, too far. We really don't need to know all that. Well, most of it we don't. There's still some of it that we do need to look into. Mainly, how does time work in Minecraft? So to understand how time works in Minecraft, we really do need to understand how Minecraft itself works. But don't worry, I'm not going to bore you to death with all the intricate details of Minecraft, but only how Notch coded what is officially known as the game loop of Minecraft. And this keeps track of how time works in any game. So how did Notch code Minecraft? How did he code the game loop? Well, to understand how a game loop works, I created this visualization here. So a game loop is essentially how often the game checks to run some type of logic. So here I have an Etho Hopper clocker that is running about every 2 seconds. So every 2 seconds, I'll do 3 things. I will bone mill a bamboo. I will check to see if this copper lantern is lit. If it is, I do not light it. So I don't turn it off. If it's not turned on, then I turn it on. And then I dispense a minecart that goes around the entire system here. So what this essentially represents is in the code, we may have a method that we run. So we tell the code to add one value to an array. So we add this bone mill to the bamboo array. We could do an if condition, so if this is turned off, then turn it on. If it's turned on, keep it on. Or we may simply just run a method that tells a minecart to go around a track, right? So there's different scenarios that could happen in the game loop. But what this Etho Hopper clock does is it essentially acts as the game loop's time. So this is how often the game will perform these sequences. Right now, it is one sequence every 2 seconds, approximately 2 seconds. This bamboo grows about every 2 seconds. A minecart is released about every 2 seconds. And every 2 seconds, we check to see if this is turned off. So let's say, for example, my game that is theoretically running about every 2 seconds that I just showed. Let's say that that is what is controlling how water spreads. So if I place a bucket, it spreads all around. Imagine if after I place the water bucket here, it took 2 seconds for this water bucket to spread to this airspace, and then another 2 seconds to spread down below this block, another 2 seconds to spread down beside this block, and then this block, and then this block, and then lastly it moves into this corner. That would be insane. So what Minecraft does, how Notch coded the system, is that we update the game every 50 milliseconds, which is 1/20th of a second. So we update the game 20 times a second. So that means it took 50 milliseconds to go here, 50 milliseconds here, 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 and then down in the corner. So this is called a tick. To help visualize what I'm describing, I actually slowed down the internal clock of Minecraft. You can do this in creative mode. So as soon as I place the block, you'll see how the water expands. Place it, and in 2 seconds, it'll expand out. Another 2 seconds, it expands down. 2 seconds, 2 seconds, 2 seconds, and then lastly 2 seconds. A slight correction, this is FutureZat coming in and adding in this visual here. Water updates every 5 ticks. I thought it was every single tick, but again, you get the picture. So this is what water would look like if it updated every 2 seconds, but the internal clock of Minecraft is much faster than this. And so if we were to run this, a single tick is when this pulse is shot out. So in Minecraft, that pulse is every 50 milliseconds. So if I were to take this out and only have a single item in here, This is how fast it's going. And this is going not near 20 times a second. Even with a really fast hopper clock, we're not able to even comprehend how fast the game is loading. We can't visually see it, is what I mean. We can comprehend it, but we cannot visually see how fast it is updating. But this tick that happens is how bamboo decides if it's ready to grow. It's how Minecraft determines if wheat is ready to grow. 20 times a second, the game will create a random value and then use that to determine, see, like this cactus just grew. The game creates a random value every tick to see if the cactus, if the bamboo, or the wheat is ready to harvest. And there's some logic there. I'm not exactly sure the intricate details. It's also during every tick interval that AI updates its pathfinding. This 50 millisecond interval is very important to the internal mechanics of all of Minecraft, and we need to know this in order to understand how this hopper clock is working. So let's figure out how an Etho hopper clock works. By looking through some technical Minecraft forums and running a few tests of my own, I found the tick rate of the Etho hopper clock. And as a disclaimer, it's so much easier to look things up than to test things yourself. I actually spent a couple hours running some tests to figure out the rate of the clock, just to realize it had been posted on a technical Reddit thread after I already found the answer. But I digress. The ticks it takes for one single pulse of the Etho hopper clock is equal to 8x minus 6, where x is the number of items you have in the Etho hopper clock. If you just have one single item, it works a little weird, so you can't use this for one item. But for every other item, we can accurately calculate the tick rate of the Etho hopper clock. This means if we have 2 items in a clock, it will pulse every 10 ticks. So 8 times 2, 16, minus 6, 10 ticks, or in other words, on average about every half second, if 20 ticks is 1 second. Here's a chart to visualize the amount of ticks for each pulse depending on the number of items in the clock. And make note that 150 items as well as 151 items is the closest we can get to having an average time of 60 seconds or 1 minute. So there's specific time intervals that we can't get the exact amounts of because we work on this 8-tick interval. So if we want to get close to 1 minute, we have to do 150 seconds where we're 6 ticks less than 1 minute, or 151 items, which is 2 ticks more than 1 minute. This is critical information for what I'm going to be talking about here later. So what is seriously lacking with the Etho hopper clock? Well, it's this. And this. And this. Well, there's a lot of things off about this. And you may be thinking, what in the world does an iron farm and a bamboo farm have to do with the Etho hopper clock? Well, it has nothing to do with the Etho hopper clock directly, but it has everything to do with what the Etho hopper clock could solve. Take this iron farm, for example. You could go online and find multiple different iron farm tutorials, and they all give you some rate of iron that this farm drops per hour. Typically it's by an hour. The issue with that is that not everybody's Minecraft world is working on the same tick rate. And to display this, we're going to use this bamboo farm here. I ran this bamboo farm for 3 separate 30-minute intervals. And what I did was I would freeze the game and set the tick rate to 20, and then I start my phone stopwatch and run for 30 minutes and see how much bamboo we get after 30 minutes. Well, with 20 ticks per second at 30 minutes, I got a total of 559. So that's my baseline. That's 100% of the bamboo I would get on an average Minecraft world. If I set the tick rate to 15 ticks per second for 30 minutes, I get 415 bamboo, which is roughly 75%. It's 74.2% of what we'd get at the baseline. Again, if I run at 10 ticks per second for 30 minutes, I get 278 bamboo sticks, which is about 50% of the baseline. Every time I go down a single tick, I should be losing about 5% of whatever I'm harvesting. So at 15 ticks, that's 5 ticks in the baseline. So I should be 25% less than the baseline, which is what you see here. You also see this here. You would expect half the tick rate, you are receiving half of the bamboo. Makes sense. I tried to do this with the iron farm, but it is extremely inconsistent. So I opted out to do the bamboo farm instead for this demonstration. You may be wondering, well, why does this even matter if the game runs 20 ticks per second on an average game? Shouldn't my game just run at 20 ticks per second and everything's okay? Well, most of the time it will run at 20 ticks per second. But if I go onto the Hermitcraft Season 10 server and I do this tick query, currently I'm getting 42.7 milliseconds per tick. So that means it's actually running a little faster than the average tick rate. If I do another sample, once this loads up a little bit and I get a little bit more terrain and I run the tick rate again, you can see that I'm slightly over the target tick rate. So there's instances where you may have some spikes and it goes above the target tick rate. So you don't have a constant 20 ticks per second all the time. If you're in a world that is very extensive, or if you're in your storage area where you have tons of entities, chests, and hoppers, your tick rate could drop. It's really difficult to use a system that counts based on real world time in order to try to describe the length of time that happens in the Minecraft world. They're not really on equal playing field. Minecraft time is based on an assumption that it is working at a similar rate that real world time runs at. To provide an illustration of what I'm describing, we can look at temperature. If I were to say 35 degrees, it would have a different meaning if I'm in Europe or if I'm in the United States, where 35 degrees in the US would indicate that I'm about to be at freezing temperatures and it could be snowing outside. But if I say 35 degrees in Europe, it's a pretty pleasant day outside. That's because the reference point that each area uses in defining its temperature is completely different. 0 degrees Celsius is the freezing point of fresh water at atmospheric. 0 degrees Fahrenheit was used to describe the freezing point of a water and salt brine solution. And 100 degrees Celsius was used to represent the boiling point of fresh water at atmospheric pressures, while 96 degrees Fahrenheit was used to describe the normal average body temperature of any human. And so for both of these temperature gradients, they go from 0 to 100 or 0 to 96, and all other temperatures are based on this linear progression on these two states. So this is why 35 degrees means something different depending on which continent you're standing on. In the same way, 1 hour of Minecraft on my computer may be a completely different time than 1 hour of Minecraft on my cousin's computer. We could both experience in the real world 1 hour of passing time, but in Minecraft, we could both be experiencing intervals of maybe 5 to 10% variations of the amount of ticks that our player is experiencing. This could tremendously affect farms and automation. So this brings me to my solution, which is this: an Etho hopper clock with a pulse extender attached to it. And you might be wondering, what in the world does this solve? Well, this gives us a very consistent reference point when determining the time that passes within the game. As we mentioned earlier, we cannot get an Etho hopper clock that goes exactly at 1 minute. But if we put exactly 150 items in here, we can get pretty darn close. So we are 6 ticks off. When this does one whole pulse after 150 items, we send an item through these droppers and into this chest. As you can tell, we have 59 items already in here. So once we reach 60, that's the perfect amount to give a comparator a signal pulse of 2. So as soon as we hit that signal pulse of 2, we run this pulse extender for exactly 60 items to drain the barrel in through the hopper into this dropper to reset the entire system. So every 1 hour, or approximately every 71,640 ticks, which is slightly 18 seconds less than the average hour experienced at a 20 tick rate. So approximately every 1 hour, if your game is working on a 20 tick per second time rate, this will go off. And if your computer is not running at a 20 tick per second rate, this will still go off at every 71,640 ticks. So this remains constant no matter how your lag in the game is, because if your tick rates drop, well, then your item flow through the hoppers also drop. So it provides you a very consistent reference point. To be clear, I'm not advocating for this specific design of this Etho hopper clock and a pulse extender to fix the problem that I'm describing. What I am proposing is that we standardize 71,640 ticks as the in-game 1 hour interval that all automated farms are based upon. Any in-game Minecraft clock will use the 71,640 in-game ticks as the basis for 1 hour. And I call it the Etho Hour, because what better homage to the man himself who created the hopper clock, which is arguably the most consistent way to determine time in Minecraft. And you can see here that this is already counting to 3. And we have to have one unstackable item in here because a barrel sends a signal pulse of 2 whenever there's a full stack plus 60 items. So it's almost meant to be. This is a pulse extender that I found online. I'll put the link in the description. It's an extremely simple solution. So we actually have to put 61 items in here to open up this hopper for 60 items due to the delays between the comparators and the redstone torches. And again, you may be asking yourself, this doesn't really solve a problem. I know for me, it can be frustrating when I look up on YouTube a gunpowder farm, an iron farm, a bamboo farm, and the rates that they show or advertise is nowhere near the rates that I may experience. And how much more frustration if I was on my laptop and my ticks per second consistently drops. But if you were to use this design, anytime this redstone torch goes off, we know that 1 Etho hour has passed by. So you can use this however you want. But for example, if you have a server where you want to allow people to use your creeper farm or your iron farm for exactly 1 hour, there's no way to do exactly 1 hour. And you could have immense variation depending on how many players are on the server. The tick rate could get reduced, so the player that gets your farm for exactly 1 hour could get gypped out of a little bit of resources because of the ticks dropping. Let's say this gets powered on, so you have a single tick that locks this hopper. And you could use this same redstone line to stop the hoppers that are feeding the chests that this user is pulling from. So this creates a very consistent way to tell time. Likewise, if you're creating an automated farm, instead of using 72,000 in-game ticks, that might be difficult to realistically determine if 72,000 ticks have surpassed if you're not in creative world. So it could be easier to use a reference that's standardized and easily implemented in a survival world such as this. Again, this is all a hypothetical of how you could use this system. This is just the baseline, so you can use this however you would like, but this gives you the closest thing to 1 hour and perfectly provides a full loop to where the clock will reset after 1 Etho hour. I hope this makes sense and I hope this is helpful. I really do wish that we could start standardizing units within Minecraft the same way we do in the real world. And time would be the perfect place to start, because time in Minecraft does not work like time in the real world.